Hello and welcome everybody to the Parsha class, Parshat Vayetzei 5783. Quick summary of the Parsha, and then we'll get right into our sources. At the end of last week's Parsha, Yaakov's life is threatened, so he needs to leave. His parents tell him to leave as well. So he's got two reasons to leave. He goes, leaves his parents' home, and is on his way to the home of Lavan to find his intended, or so is the plan. He on the way, he sleeps. He has a dream of the famous dream of the ladder, the angels going up and down, and it has obviously a lot of symbolism, which we've spoken about in previous years. Then again, after that, he meets Rachel, and he wants to marry her. Lavan tricks him, and he marries Leah, and then he wants to marry Rachel still. He does, and eventually starts having children with the two of them. And he works for Lavan for a long time, and then at a certain point when he tells Lavan that he wants to leave eventually, Lavan says, "Great, no problem. Just do me a favor, work for me a little bit longer." All right, so he makes some sort of wage. It's going to help him be to leave eventually with some sort of success. He needs some sort of wealth to be able to, support this family, especially as they travel back to Israel. And he does, and he's shown through a dream how to best have, his sheep and folds, and how they are able to have the most under the most in the quickest time, etc., etc. And eventually he leaves Lavan with his family, and that's how the Parsha ends, with him on his way to Israel, where we'll see what happens next week, God willing. So, without further ado, let's get into the sources, and let's see some of the questions that I sent out in the email. See if we can answer them using the classic sources, and so some recent sources as well. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, where are we? Oh, that's weird. Huh. Just a moment. Technical issue. Oh, here we go. That's weird. Okay, but here we are. As weird as it may be. So first of all, Chazal tell us in several different places, several times in the commentaries in this week's Parsha, they tell us that Yaakov didn't go directly to Lavan's house when he left his parents' house. He stopped by in the yeshiva called the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. It's mentioned in a number of places. I just brought one of the places here for you. This is the last Rashi in last week's Parsha, which talks about why we need to know about the children of Yishmael. And one of the reasons he says is so we can better calculate the age of Yaakov and Yosef, etc. So one of the lines there in the Rashi, it's a long Rashi, one of the longest, if I'm not mistaken. It says there towards the right here in the middle of the screen here. It says "V'lamdeinu mikan shenit min bebeit ever yudalid shana v'achar kach alech lecharan." He stayed. He hid in the yeshiva of Ever, which is the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. He stayed in that yeshiva for 14 years before he made his way to Haran, to Lavan's house. And the classic question that's asked is, why? Why did he have to go to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever? And one of the people who asks this question is none other than the Emet Yaakov, the Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzedek Livracha. And he has a really long essay, and it's a worthwhile piece. But we're going to sort of jump around in it to find our answer to our question, which is, again, the question is, why did he have to go to yeshiva of Shem and Ever? And he brings up that indeed, Chazal tell us, there's a Gemara in Megillah, this Rashi's source as well. The Gemara in Megillah, I believe it's the end of the first parak, at Tet Zion Amud Bet, at 16b. you want to look it up, it tells us that when it comes to Talmud Torah, learning Torah is greater than honoring your parents. What does that mean? It means that you can see from this example that Yaakov was supposed to honor his parents and go to Lavan. And what does he do instead? He goes to learn Torah. So the Torah is seemingly telling us that learning Torah is more important, is a greater mitzvah than honoring one's parents, which is strange. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky asks the question. He says there, it's a very strange thing to say such a thing. He says he gives a mashal, a metaphor, an allegory perhaps, and he's going to turn it on its head, as you'll see in a few moments. But right now, it goes like this: he says, so what is this similar to? He asks his son to go buy something for him, right? Goes to go to the store, get something for me. On the way to the store, machalit haben shehu wrote a little more Torah. The child decides, you know what? I'm on my way to the store. You know what? I'd rather not. And he goes to the yeshiva, sits down, and learns. This is better than honoring his parents. That doesn't sound right. The father needs something from the store. So what's going on? So you cannot understand what's going on. You cannot fathom the importance of what Yaakov did if you don't know what the yeshiva of Shem and Ever is. It's also a very famous question. It's worth asking. I've been asked this before. What did they learn there? The yeshiva of Shem and Ever is 1,000 years or so before the giving of the Torah. What did they learn? There's no Torah. Did they learn Gemara? Did they learn the Musar? What did they learn there? So, although there are a number of answers to this question, one thing that is very clear is that whatever they learned is something that must be somehow related to Shem and Ever, right? What could Shem and Ever teach? So says Rav Yaakov that what they taught there was their experience dealing with people who weren't in the yeshiva, who should have maybe been in the yeshiva but weren't. Right? Shem had to deal with the people of the flood. He grew up around the people who died in the flood. Right? Shem is the son of Noach, and Ever dealt with the kind of people who lived in the time of the dispersion of the Tower of Babel. So both of them lived around the time of people who were not so great and not so holy. Now let's bring this back into context. What was Yaakov doing? Yaakov spent his entire life, the Torah tells us, Yoshev Ohalim, he was sitting in tents. And the way that Chazal explained that is he was learning Torah. What Torah did he learn? He learned the Torah of Yitzchak, his father. He learned the Torah of Abraham, his grandfather. He learned the Torah of great people. He was surrounded by greatness his entire life. And now his father sent him to Lavan. Not such a great person. He needs to know, he needs to learn how to deal with that kind of person. And he's not going to learn that just by sitting in the tent back home with Yitzchak. He needs to go out into the world and learn the kind of Torah that is written about going out into the world. This is a sort of jumping off point to go to a person like Lavan. You can't just, sight unseen, come up to Lavan and then expect to be able to survive that kind of test, that kind of challenge of dealing with that kind of a person. You need to have some sort of learning about how to deal with that kind of a person. So remember that metaphor about the father who sends his son to the store? So it says Rav Yaakov, he says here, let me see. I have it here somewhere. ועכשיו אין זה דומה אלא לאב שצווה לבנו לקנות לו לולב ואתרוג לסוכות. This is not like a father who's sending his son out to buy something in the store. This is a father who's sending his son to the store to buy a lulav and etrog. Wouldn't you want, as a father, wouldn't you want your son to go find out what a lulav and etrog is before going to the store to get one? How much should it cost? What am I looking for? What are the details? That's what Yaakov did. Yaakov went to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever to listen to his father, not to ignore the command of his father. Because part of going to Lavan and going to Haran, part of that is going to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. So now we have a whole new perspective on this idea that's in the Gemara, that it's better to learn Torah than to listen to your parents. That can't be true. Listening to your parents is also a mitzvah. It's a positive mitzvah in the Torah. It's one of the 10 commandments. Five. It's one of the 10 commandments, and therefore it's how you do it is by learning Torah. You can't really completely honor your parents unless you know how to do that. So that's exactly what he did, and that's how Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky explains it. I have the entire essay here in the sources. If you want to get a chance to look through it, it is a beautiful piece, and it's highly worthwhile. And I think it really explains a lot about how we perceive, how we understand the Holy Torah. All right, let's go further and let's get into the psukim themselves. So chapter 28, verse 15 says, "V'hinei anochi imach." Hashem appears to, as I said before, appears to Yaakov in a dream. Yaakov is concerned, and Hashem calms him down, and he says, "Don't worry, I'm with you. Hinei anochi imach, I'm with you. Ushmarticha, and I'm going to protect you. B'chol asher telech, everywhere you go. Vashivoticha el ha'adama hazot, and I promise you this land. Ki lo zavcha ad asher im asiti et asher dibarti lach, and I'm going to bring you back. I'm not going to leave you, and you're going to have everything that I promised you." It's a beautiful promise. The question is, why is he promising this? Is Yaakov concerned about something? Is he not worthy of God's blessing, that Hashem has to calm him down and tell him, no, you're worthy. So according to Chazal, he was worried. But what he's worried about is perhaps a little bit strange to many of us. And there are different opinions about what it is he's worried about. But one of the beautiful essays here was going to be from the pre-Tzaddik. Right, the pre-Tzaddik, Rav Tzaddik HaKohen of Lublin. And so he says here, and it's a long piece, and I even cut out some of it, as is indicated by those three dots over there. But he quotes a midrash, a Tanchuma. So it says in the Tanchuma a strange thing. It says "Haporig et hanefesh b'shkaga." The Tanchuma is, by the way, halachic midrash, more or less. Because the halacha is that if somebody kills somebody by accident, we know what happens. Gola, so the person has to be exiled to a city of refuge. This is in the Torah. You don't need a midrash for that. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of the midrash, there's this whole lesson about how that works, etc., etc. And then the midrash segues by a long shot and says, "V'Yaakov Avinu gala l'charan," and Yaakov himself had to go into exile to Haran. Borach b'nafsho, because he took a life, or he was concerned he was going to take a life, or something like that. So that's why Hashem comes to him in the dream, right? That's why Hashem comes to him in the dream and calms him down. So says the Pri Tzaddik. Whoa. He says, hold on a second there. Were we saying that Yaakov is killing somebody, or wants to kill somebody, or has killed somebody. What's Yaakov done? Who's he killing? That's not why he went. He went because his parents told him to. We just went over that. And because of this, Hashem has to show up in a dream. It's strange. So let's skip to part of the answer. So he continues and he says, he quotes a number of sources, and all of them are about this midah that Yaakov has, this characteristic that he's famous for, and that's the midah of emet, of truth. Emet is truth, complete and honest, no hogwash, truth. And that's what Yaakov is. So if that's the case, we have a problem, because he, at least, even if what he said or did might have been true in last week's parsha when he took Esau's blessing, it is definitely questionable. Let's call it questionable. It feels wrong. And in fact, Yaakov was concerned because, as it says, there's a story in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that there's a place famous for its truth, and they never lied ever. No miscommunication, nothing, no hints, no allegations, all true, all the way through. And then comes along a tzaddik and wants to live there, and they're a little bit concerned because they have this reputation, so that they warn him, and he says that's fine. And then he moves in, he marries, he has 2 sons, and there was a particular day when, because his wife needs privacy and somebody wants to come visit, he tells them that his wife isn't home, even though she was. Now, this is completely allowed, by the way, under normal conditions. A white lie like this, in order to protect somebody's dignity, definitely not a problem. But because this town, this place, had a reputation for complete honesty, so what happened was that his sons died. Rahman al-San. All right. So, Mito bet banav. So his 2 sons died, and then he was basically forced to leave out of town. If truth is Yaakov's main midah, then the slightest, perfectly honest, honorable reason to lie or tell a mistruth, or any kind of other language you want to use for that, for Yaakov, it's not fitting. For Yaakov has to be on a higher level. And when he wasn't on that higher level, he became concerned for himself. Rightfully so. And he was worried that in some sense he did a huge sin and that he needed to go into exile. He basically went into self-exile for his own behavior. Killing somebody is not the only reason to go into exile. There are a number of examples throughout Jewish history of great sages who've gone into self-exile for much, much smaller things than killing. And Yaakov is like that. Yaakov realized that there's a pagam, there was a certain stain on his own characteristic, and he ran away. He went into exile to do teshuva. That's a way of doing teshuva, is to put oneself into exile, and that's what he did. The meeting that Hashem has with him, the vision that Hashem shows him in this dream with the angels and the ladder and with the comforting words that Hashem says, are to prove Yaakov wrong. Yaakov put himself into exile, but he didn't really have to. He was wrong in this. What he did was 100% kosher. There was no pagam at all. Everything he did was completely allowed. He listened to, by the way, it wasn't his own idea to begin with. wasn't like, oh, I want to see ways to earn that blessing. That had nothing to do with that. His mother told him to do this. And even when he almost like rebelled against her and said, maybe I shouldn't, I'm going to get a curse, etc., he argues, he fights back. And she convinces him. There's nothing wrong that he did. And any feeling that he felt that it was the wrong thing was just being a little oversensitive. And that's why H-Shem has to appear to him and calm him down. On the subject of Yaakov and his purity, we need to talk about a perhaps uncomfortable topic, and that's some of the language that's used in this week's parsha with regard to husbands and wives. It says in chapter 29, verse 21, Chaf Tet Chaf Aleph, when Yaakov works for Rachel to earn her as a wife, it says Vayomer Yaakov el Lavan. Yaakov says to Lavan, Hava et ishti, give me my wife. Ki malu yamai, because the time has fulfilled my quota of time of the work I needed to do. Va'avoa eleha, and I will come together with her. I will have relations with her. This is not the words most fathers-in-law want to hear, by the way, but it's also not the words that anybody appropriate would want to hear. Give me my wife so I can have relations with her. Is that a way to speak? That's a question that's brought up by Rabbeinu Bachai, and he quotes first of all the Ramban. He says, the Ramban says, Ein zeh derech musar af ki betzadikim. This isn't a way to speak even for tzadikim. Val yomar hakatuv avoa aleha lo shetitin otav alecha darche. So Ramban brings it up. This is not a way to speak. So it says Rabbeinu Bachai in his explanation, V'taken l'parish ki adibur hazel Yaakov lo haya mitzad hatava shaya bo roa musar rak mitzad haseichel. We have to understand that when Yaakov is speaking, he's not speaking from a Yissachar place. Right? He's not speaking like the rest of us would. He's speaking from a completely different mindset. That is what his wife is for in his mindset. To become close to him, to have relations with him. That's what the wife is for. It's a completely logical explanation. In other words, if you had, I don't know, a dictionary definition of marriage, part of that definition, I mean, not going to get into it now. We're talking about, let's not use any of the new dictionaries because they might have all kinds of new definitions of what marriage is. Well, what marriage has traditionally been, right? Part of it is the idea that a husband and wife will have relations. That's a function of marriage. Not the only thing that's for, but that's part of it. And I'm not going to get into the Kabbalistic aspects of this. There's what to say there as well. But you have to understand that Yaakov is not speaking from a makom tava. He's not speaking from his desire. He's speaking from his seicha, from what he knows, from logic. That is logically what he needs his wife for now. Right? And he goes on. It's also a long piece. I have another piece underlined here for you. These are not his underlines; these are mine. Lo hayta kavanat redifat hatava chas v'shalom ki im hakavanat hamitzvah bilvad kasher yedu b'nevuah. He knew that he had a mitzvah to do from prophecy. He knew that Rachel was his wife and that Leah would be his wife. So this is all part of prophecy that he had, and he's speaking on that level. It's interesting also that later on in the parsha, and Rabbeinu Bachai brings this up, when Reuven brings terafim, the dudaim, to his mother, to Leah, and Rachel wants some, and apparently There's all kinds of questions. What exactly these dudaim are? Are they mandrakes? Are they some sort of plant that somehow helps with relations? I don't know. Whatever it is, Rachel wants these, some sort of aphrodisiac perhaps, and Leah, either jokingly or maybe seriously, I'm not sure, maybe a little bit of both, says, "Oh, now you took my husband, now you want my son's plants as well." So anyway, Rachel, indeed, this is going to be a relevant piece to something else we're going to say later, but Rachel indeed gets these dudaim, and she, in that merit, well, either way, before we get to the merit, the sforno on that verse says an interesting thing. It says, when he comes home, Leah says to him, "I bought you for tonight with these dudaim," which definitely doesn't sound appropriate. And so says this forno, "Ubizeh sipur nira meguna etzel magle panim b'Torah." We see that there are people with disgusting ideas who are misrepresenting the Torah, right? And they don't understand that this inyan shetoda etzel ha'avad k'mo shaya inyano etzel adam ve'ishto kodam chetam. They saw the world through the same pristine, honest, humble, pure way, through that same vision that Adam and Chava had before the sin. We're looking at it through our perspective. This is after the sin, but we're not like the Avot. They're on a much higher level, as we've seen from the previous comments today. Right? We're talking about a Yaakov Avinu. We're talking about a Rachel and a Leah who are his pair. Right? They fit him in a number of ways, including in their understanding of purity. So, that being the case, we have a whole new understanding that even when the avot and imahot speak like this, they don't mean it the same way that we would mean it if we were speaking in the same way. All right, let's go further in the parsha. Chapter 30, verse 18. Right after this story with the dudaim, and this is something we're trying to do every once in a while, every year so far of this parsha class. This is now the third year that we're learning Vayetzei, Baruch Hashem, and every year I'd like to maybe touch on the naming of the shvatim, of the tribes, right? Yaakov and Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah have a number of children, as we mentioned before. 11 of the 12 tribes are born in this week's parsha, and also their sister Dinah. Now, all of their names are sometimes cute, sometimes serious, and sometimes just plain old strange. So let's look at this particular one. Right after, like I said, right after the giving of the dudaim to her sister, Leah, Tomar, she has another child. But Tomar Leah, Natan Elokim Schari, Asher Natati Shivchati Li'ishi V'tikra Shemo Yissachar. So she said, God has given me my reward for having given my maid my husband. So she realizes why she received the reward. And as the schar, to remember that schar, that reward, she names her son Yissachar. Schar being reward. Okay? Says the Chida, Nachal Kedumim. He quotes Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, right? The gematria of Rachel, the gematria of Yissachar, which is 10 plus 300 plus 300 plus 20 plus 200, is the same as the gematria for the phrase Rachel masra Leah simanim. Rachel gave the signs to Leah. Okay. Rachel masra Leah simanim. What is this referring to? So we know, Chazal tell us that when Rachel and Yaakov were engaged to be married, they were about to get married, and Yaakov suspected that Lavan would do some sort of trick, so he had Leah memorize either a sign or it might have been a hand gesture, whatever it was. That would be the secret code to know that that was indeed Rachel, and nobody would be duped. So what happened was, Rachel saw that Lavan was preparing Leah to get married. Leah was getting the gown, and Leah was talking to photographers, etc. So Rachel was not clueless. She knew that what Lavan was doing, and she said, "Okay, so I don't have anything to worry about because Leah is not going to know the simanim. Joke's going to be on Lavan, and then Yaakov is going to be able to marry me, and then we'll live happily ever after." But what happens is that over time, right before the wedding, Rachel must have realized that Lavan is not the only one who's going to get punished or hurt from this. Leah herself is going to be embarrassed. She's going to be there, and she's going to show Yaakov is going to expect the simanim. Leah is not going to know them, and then that's going to be it. So what did Rachel do? Rachel taught her sister the simanim, whatever the hand gesture or the code word, whatever it was. So that's why the gematria of Yissachar is. He quotes, like I said, he quotes Rabbi Eliezer Miza from the Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, as we call him in English. And so now he wants to know, what's this connection between that phrase and the name Yissachar? So let's look at the verse again. Remember, what did she say? Leah said that H-Shem has given me a reward that I gave my maid to my husband. And indeed she did. And so what the Torah is telling us is that she might have been under the impression, and also there's another chazal I should mention, that this event of Yissachar being born is, as I said before, right after the giving of the dudaim to Rachel, and there are rabbis who tell us that it was in reward for her sacrificing those dudaim to Rachel, her co-wife, her reluctant co-wife, right? Leah was probably not happy about being less beloved than she could have been. Not probably. The Torah itself testifies to this. So, and that's the case. She's giving these dudaim to her sister, and now her sister could possibly get pregnant, and then her sister might be able to be at least on some sort of even playing field in terms of motherhood with her sister Leah. So, because of that sacrifice, that's why Yissachar was born right after that giving of the dudaim. So Yissachar is born because of that, or is Yissachar born because when Leah stopped giving birth, she gave her she gave Zilpah, her handmaid, to Yaakov. So now we've got two reasons that Leah could have thought that she's getting rewarded, either because of the Zilpah situation where she gave her handmaid, or because of the dudaim that she let her sister Rachel have. And it says the Torah, none of that. You're gonna you think that it's because of your generosity. It's not because of your generosity that you had these children. It's because of the generosity of your sister. Because your sister saw you and realized you'd be embarrassed, wanted to save you the embarrassment. And because of that, she gave you the code. And that's why you had this child. That's why his name is not Schar. A cool name, by the way. I think they tried that in Lion King. Either way, his name is not Schar. His name is Yissachar. Right? His name is a reference to the fact that this gematria, that it's Rachel's merit that allowed him to be born. That's what the Chida writes here. I think it's a beautiful shot, and that's why there's this great reward of his being born. Okay, let's fast forward to sort of the end of the parsha. Okay, got two more comments, and we're gonna have to call it a day. The fact is that Yaakov earned his leave from Lavan, and as he's leaving, it says here, Lavan halach ligzoz et tzono. Lavan had to do his own work. He wanted to go take care of his herd. V'tignov Rachel et terafim asher leviha, and Rachel came and stole the terafim that her father had. The terafim, there are a number of explanations of what this is. Some people say it's like the English word trophy, right? It was just a decoration, it had nothing to do with idol worship. Others say that it was idolatrous. Others say it was magical, and you can do all kinds of powers of a seer, etc. So Rashi tells us, Rashi's explanation of these terafim is that lahafrish et why did Rachel go and steal them, especially now? Lahafrish et avicha me'avodah zara need kavna. Her intent, and this is from the Midrash, Rashi gets this. Her intent was that she would stop her father from idol worship. Now, here's a very important lesson in Kiruv, in Jewish outreach, or in any kind of time you're trying to convince somebody to do or not do something for their benefit. Don't take cigarettes away from a smoker unless they want you to. Otherwise, you're not going to accomplish very much. It's absolutely impossible you'll convince somebody to stop doing something just by taking it away from them. That's not how it works. If they want help, if they have trouble going cold turkey, and they want to get rid of some sort of bad behavior, and they say, "Hey, can you help me out? Can you hold on to this because I don't have the self-control to do it myself?" In that case, go ahead and hold on to it. But you can't just sneak up into their house and steal their cigarettes or steal their vodka and expect a good result from all of that. So it is a very strange thing that Rachel did. And Rav Shimon Schwab has a beautiful comment to explain that Rachel knew quite a bit more than we give her credit for. So it says, quotes Rashi, that she did this in order to, quotes Rashi, who's quoting a midrash, that she did this in order to prevent him from doing avodah zarah. V'yesh lomar shebevadai lo chashva she'al yedei zeh yeh Lavan porish me'avodah zarah le'olam. Did she really think he was going to stop doing avodah zarah forever now that she took away these things? Sharei yachal chol hasig terafim achirim. He could buy other. They sold them in stores. You know, get them on Amazon. You don't have to. These aren't the last ones. Ooh, the world's last terafim. That's not what was happening. But Kavanta Bezeh, her real intent, she knew she yesh la'avicha k'tzat malo tovot. She knew that her father had certain good qualities. Ad she'tachen she'yaba alaha kadosh baruch hu b'chalom halayla, and that H-Shem would appear to him. It could appear to him in a dream. V'yitrot bo shelo yazik et Yaakov, and he would warn him not to bother Yaakov. Beta shelo, and whatever Yaakov has with him. As we see in truth actually happen after this. Aval hevina shebavada shelo tishra hashchina b'makom sheyesh avodah zarah. The Shekhinah does not reside in a place of avodah zarah. That dream would not have happened if he had his terafim with him. So no, she doesn't want Lavan to stop worshiping avodah zarah forever, although that wouldn't be a bad idea. Just tonight. Tonight, we need the Shekhinah to come and appear to him, as the Shekhinah does sometimes to save tzaddikim. The Shekhinah wouldn't do that in a place of avodah zarah. So that's why she frishta avodah zarah b'sha'ah kadei sheyeh muchshar la'asharat hashekhinah. So she emptied out the house of the terafim so that it would be prepared for the Shekhinah. Lo yirdov acharehem. Then he will not chase after them afterwards, because as the Shekhinah will tell him, Hashem will tell him not to, and he's going to listen. But Hashem is not going to tell him not to if he has the idols all around him. That's a beautiful idea from Rav Shimon Schwab. We haven't heard from him in a while. Maybe we'll try to pick up on that more in the future. The last comment today comes from Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadok Livracha. Asks a simple question. In chapter 31, verse 20, Lamed Aleph Chaf, it says, "V'yigno Yaakov et leiv Lavan harami." So Yaakov sort of stole his heart. In other words, he sort of tricked him that he was right, because al bli higidlo et boreach hu. He didn't tell him that he was leaving. Right? On this final stay in Lavan's home, the final night, he didn't tell him he was leaving the next day. You didn't really have to, I guess, right? Nobody ever said you have to tell me before you leave, but he didn't tell him. The Torah makes mention of it. We have to understand why. Not only that, but we have to also understand, Rav Chaim Kanievsky's real question is, why is it that in this particular verse, Yaakov and Lavan isn't just Lavan, the brother of Rivka. Lavan is not just the father of Rachel and Leah. He's Lavan ha'arami. He's the Aramean. Only this verse. Keep in mind that his name is mentioned many times throughout this whole parsha. The whole Sedra says Lavan's name over and over and over again. Never once does it call him Lavan ha'arami except for here. So to begin to understand why that's true, we look at a Gemara in Megillah, Yud Gimel Amud Bet 13b, where it talks about in the meeting of Yaakov and Rachel, that Rachel told him that her father is a Rama'ah, is a trickster. And she says, I don't know if you're going to be able to deal with that, because you're such an honest, good person, Yaakov. So he says to her, Amrale, he says to her, and even a tzaddik knows how to be a trickster. Im navar titavar, vim ikesh titapal. So you're allowed to know how to deal with tricksters, sometimes by tricking them back. Sorry. Yeah, sometimes by tricking them back. So that's what the Gemara says over there. And it says Reb Chaim in Tamid Dekra. He kasher ra Yaakov et Rachel bat Lavan afi imo tzon Lavan afi imo vigash Yaakov v'yagel et sorry. No, we're looking at something else. This is the wrong piece. Same page. Wrong paragraph. Sorry about that. Yeah, I brought you the wrong piece. I'll tell you. I'll have to tell you outside what Rav Chaim said. Sorry about that. I'll try to fix that for future reference. Says Rav Chaim, what is it that we're allowed to be tricksters with? A trickster himself. And how do you say trickster in Hebrew? Rama'ah, right? Resh, Mem, Aleph, Hey. Those are the exact same letters as Ha'arami. The reason that Lavan is called Ha'arami in this verse is to point out the fact that he is the trickster that Yaakov is allowed to behave this way with. It's not wrong for him to leave Lavan in this way without telling him he was going, because that's how a trickster behaves. And Yaakov's mode of conduct now has to be that kind of mode. He has to be ready to leave under that kind of condition. He's living with this kind of person. He has to deal with him on that playing field. He's not at some completely different level. This fits in beautifully with what we said in the very beginning of why he had to go to the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. Because in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, he learned the Torah that he couldn't have learned in Abraham's house, in Yitzchak's house. He learned the Torah of how to deal with these kinds of people. How do you deal with these kinds of people? You leave without telling them. That's one thing. Right? If you know some sort of trick about how to make your spotted sheep into speckled sheep, into striped sheep, whatever it is, if you know that kind of trick, don't brag about it. Keep it to yourself. That's another lesson he learned. So this parsha is one big, beautiful lesson of how tzaddikim, how great people, how they behave in the outside world. More and more, if you look around, you'll see that the outside world is becoming more and more the inside world. And if we need to learn how to behave, how to actually react to this kind of behavior and to maybe hopefully fix it so it doesn't have a pagam, so it gets back to the innocence and honesty and beauty of Adam and Chava before the Chet, we have to learn the Torah of how to do that. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, and I hope all is well. Take care.